with Courtney today, who is a dietitian, a vegan dietitian, who practices here on the Gold Coast. I get a lot of questions about veganism and how healthy it is, and should I be taking B12, and what do you take? And quite honestly, I don't have most of the answers to that. I love living a vegan lifestyle. I really thrive on a vegan diet, but yeah, I'm not a dietitian, and thankfully you are. So yeah, this is Courtney. Do you have anything you want to say before we get into the video?
Yeah, well, as Amanda said, my name's Courtney. I'm a vegan dietitian. I practice in Miami on the Gold Coast, so I work for my own business called Nourished by Plants. So obviously my area of expertise is plant-based and vegan nutrition. So we are going to answer a lot of questions today, but just a general disclaimer is that all the information that I will be providing and all the advice and tips and everything is is general advice, and you should always seek the advice from your doctor or dietitian to get individualized advice for your unique health needs. So everything that we do say today is just general information and education.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, as Courtney mentioned, she is going to be answering a bunch of questions that you submitted via Instagram. I'm going to also leave Courtney's Instagram and all of her details down below if you do want to check her out. And yeah, I'm really excited. Let's get into it. This is going to be probably quite a long video, but I hope that it helps you out if you're interested in transitioning to a vegan diet or a vegan lifestyle, or you're interested in incorporating more plants into your diet. Okay, so probably the most common question that every vegan has, or someone who is interested in transitioning to a vegan diet has, is should I use B12 supplements?
So short answer, I guess, is yes. Everyone on a vegan diet should definitely use a B12 supplement. But the reason for that is, B12 is very hard to get on a vegan diet because it is found in a lot of animal products like meat and dairy. So getting on a vegan diet is only really, can only really get it through fortified products. However, this can be a little bit unreliable. So a B12 supplement is the cheapest and easiest, the most effective way to make sure you're getting enough B12, because B12 is really, really important for like a healthy brain and nervous system, and the amount and how frequent is kind of what works for you. I guess, specifically the amount of B12 that you need in a supplement is kind of a large dose compared to what the requirements are.
Right.
But our body only absorbs a very small amount of this. Okay. So if you're taking like a daily B12 supplement, you need a little bit less, or if you're taking one a couple times a week, a little bit more, or once a week is a bigger dose with that as well. So it just depends on, what works for you. But I guess generally, yes, everyone needs a B12 supplement. That's kind of a non-negotiable on a vegan diet.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, another very hot topic is what is worth supplementing as a vegan?
Yeah, great question. I guess so many people are always worried about supplementing and everything. But I think as well, a lot of people do ask, what do I need to supplement? What can't I get on a vegan diet? Like, what am I lacking? But I think as well, it's just important to like take a step back and realize that on a vegan diet, you can get so many nutrients. I think people kind of get a bit scared of being vegan because they think they're going to be lacking in so many nutrients.
Right.
But there are still so many nutrients that you can get, like plenty of like fiber and protein, healthy fats, and lots of vitamin C, and lots of antioxidants and everything. So if you're eating like a whole food plant-based diet and getting what you need from all the food groups, like your fruits and veggies, grains and proteins and calcium rich foods, you will be meeting a lot of your nutrient needs on a vegan diet. But of course there are some that are a bit harder to get, like with even just general healthy eating. People that aren't vegan, they might need to pay extra attention to certain nutrients. But I guess what's worth supplementing, obviously we just said B12, everyone should be supplementing B12. Potentially vitamin D, like if you're not on the Gold Coast like we are and get lots of sunshine, like sunshine's a very easy way to get vitamin D on a vegan diet. So potentially if you live somewhere where you don't get much sun, or if you work really long hours inside all the time and don't really get to see the sun much, vitamin D could be beneficial for you. And then there's just some other ones that if you don't have a well planned out vegan diet, they might be useful. Certain things like iron or zinc or iodine, selenium, but a lot of those nutrients can be met on a vegan diet if it's kind of well planned and nutritious and balanced. Like for example, selenium was one that sometimes it's hard to get on a vegan diet, but if you just include a couple Brazil nuts every day,
right,
you'll meet your needs. So little things like that mean you don't need to supplement if you do just take a bit of care with planning your diet. But otherwise, some of those could be potentially necessary for you as an individual depending on what you eat.
Yeah, I feel like as well in Australia we're really lucky in terms of our healthcare system. Like I'm always getting blood tests. When I say always getting blood tests, I'm getting like a couple a year just to make sure that everything's all good, and it like gives you a great indication of how everything's going for you. Okay, so next question is omega-3 on a vegan diet.
I guess that's also another nutrient that people are concerned about and always ask questions about. But basically, omega-3s are your fatty acids. So there are 3 main omega-3 fatty acids. So the short names are ALA, EPA and DHA. I'm not going to say their long names because I probably won't pronounce it, but that's kind of all you need to know. So ALA, EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA, I mean, not on a vegan diet, are found in fish and like fish oils, and those EPA and DHA are the types that our body actually uses. But on a plant-based diet, we can get sources of ALA, which is still an omega-3 fatty acid, and then that's just converted into EPA and DHA in our body.
Right.
So good sources of ALA on a vegan diet are things like flax seeds and chia seeds, hemp seeds and walnuts. But it's just important to know that the conversion from ALA into EPA and DHA is really, really inefficient.
Right.
And a lot of people, won't be very good converters of that. And because this is influenced by like your age and your gender and what you eat generally as well. Like if you have lots of omega-6s, it can sometimes reduce the conversion rate of that ALA. So I mean, I guess the main message is if you do include a few servings of those ALA rich foods every single day, you should be fine.
Right.
But you can't be 100% certain because we don't know what you as an individual is going to convert.
Right.
So sometimes an omega-3 supplement is recommended just for a safety net, so you know that you are getting enough. Whether you do include those foods or not, it can just be there. If you have the means to afford it, then it could be useful.
Right, okay, cool. Yeah. That's really good to know, actually. I feel like omega-3 is something that I am so not educated on in any capacity. Like I've never fully thought about it. Like B12 is something when I went vegan, I was like, I need to know about it and all of that kind of stuff, but omega-3 is something that I'm like, I can't wrap my head around.
But I think like you include lots of like flax and hemp and chia seeds and all that, so you'd be getting a few servings. Yeah,
that's the thing. I eat a lot of like things like nuts and seeds in my diet, so Next question is, how do I make sure I get enough iodine?
So iodine, another one of those nutrients I mentioned earlier, like if you just plan your diet and have a few simple strategies, you can be making sure you're getting enough. But for those that don't know, iodine is really important for your thyroid health. And on a, for adults, the actual amount that we need is 150 micrograms per day. I'm just saying that because putting it into context for the vegan foods I'm about to list. So an easy way to get iodine is through iodized salt. So having half a teaspoon of iodized salt gives you 130 micrograms. So you're almost kind of at your target if you use iodized salt. And also in Australia, we are lucky our bread is fortified with iodine. So that's good. So a slice of bread, you get roughly 20 micrograms. So if you're using iodized salt and having the fortified bread, then you're generally fine. But for some people that, because adding lots and lots of salt obviously isn't good for your health long term. So if you're someone that might already have like high blood pressure, it's recommended you do reduce the amount of sodium that you do have. So potentially someone like that could benefit from a supplement. Or if you're someone that already eats a lot of kind of processed or packaged foods, they generally have a lot of sodium added into them. So you don't want to be adding like more and more salt to your diet. So for the most of us, if we're eating mostly whole foods, and adding iodized salt is totally fine. But some people may benefit from a supplement.
Is iodized salt something that you can get from like the supermarket? Oh, okay.
Just like Coles and Woolies, you can get a massive thing for just a few dollars. Like it's super cheap.
So it's like, especially if you're doing like home cooked meals a lot of the time that you're going to put salt anyway, you may as well just use iodized salt. That's a great tip. Like I think I'm going to do that.
Do it.
Okay, so this is definitely one of my favorite questions of all the questions that we got, and it is, what are the best sources of iron on a vegan diet?
Why is that your favorite?
Well, I feel like iron is this thing, right, that it's kind of like the protein thing. Like when people go vegan or they like go to their GP and like you tell them you're vegan, they're like, what about your iron?
Yeah.
And that was always something, because like I've been vegetarian pretty much my entire life, and my iron was always something that my GPs would be like, we need to check your iron, we need to check your iron.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was like so present in my life. Well, because when people think of iron, they immediately think of red meat, I feel.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, if you're low in iron, the first thing they say is red meat. Like even if you're vegan, like you need red meat, and obviously a lot of us, no vegans want to include red meat.
Yeah.
So yeah, a great question. So good sources of iron are like your protein containing foods, so soy products like tofu and tempeh and soybeans and soy milk. Also your legumes like chickpeas, lentils, black beans, red kidney beans. A lot of those foods are quite good sources of iron.
Right.
And you can also get small amounts in whole grains like brown rice, brown pasta, quinoa, whole grain bread, and then nuts and seeds as well. So, I mean, the really good sources of iron are the ones I listed at the start, and then it kind of goes down smaller amounts, but if you're eating them throughout the day, you'll be, meeting or close to meeting your iron needs. But I guess the big fear with iron is just because the recommendations for vegans for iron is 1.8 times the general population, because the type of iron in plant foods is called non-heme iron. That's like a bit chemistry based, but like non-heme iron. And then in animal-based foods, it's called heme iron.
Right.
And our body absorbs heme iron a lot easier than the plant-based sources. That's kind of why the requirements are so much higher and why people freak out about it so much.
Right.
So meeting those requirements, can be quite hard because it is so high, but there are things we can do to help our body absorb the iron more efficiently on a vegan diet.
Right.
And you might have heard people say pairing vitamin C with iron.
Yeah.
A lot of people do seem to know that, which is good, because vitamin C can help our body absorb the non-heme iron.
Right.
But just with vitamin C, it is important to know that it needs to be a raw source of vitamin C, as in like raw fruits or veggies, because vitamin C can be destroyed in some cooking processes.
Okay.
So you need that, foods like oranges or strawberries or kiwi fruits or red capsicum, they're all good sources of vitamin C.
Right.
And also as well, if you consume like coffee or tea with iron-rich foods on a vegan diet, that can reduce the absorption. So trying not to have coffee or tea with your meals.
Interesting.
Is a good tip as well.
Wow. It's so fascinating, isn't it? Like the way the human body works so differently with so many different foods. It's insane.
I think it's well important with that too. Obviously, a lot of people stress about iron on a vegan diet, but iron deficiency is so common worldwide, no matter what diet you're eating.
So true.
So it's not just a vegan issue, it's an everyone issue.
Yeah,
but
so
vegans
true.
for some reason just get told it's their problem. Yeah.
Okay, so I know I said that the iron question was my favorite question, but this question actually might be my favorite question. And the question is, how do I get enough protein when I don't like tofu, and what are some good sources of protein that aren't soy based? And I really love this because I'm not like a huge fan of tofu. I'm coming around to it, and I often feel like I know that I'm getting enough protein because like I feel really good in my body and my bloods have all been fine, but at the same time I like feel like I doubt myself sometimes. I'm like, is heaps of chickpeas enough for me to be getting enough protein, kind of thing? So yeah, anyway,
cool. Okay. So if you don't like tofu, but you still, because the second part of that was if you don't want to consume soy products, so potentially if you have an intolerance or allergy or something. But if you're not avoiding soy products, but you don't like tofu, there still is tempeh, which is still a great soy-based source of protein. And then like soybeans, like edamame beans as well, or soy milk. So they're like other sources of soy-based foods if you don't like tofu but can still eat soy. But if you're trying not to include soy for whatever reason, then other great sources are your legumes like chickpeas, lentils, black beans, kidney beans, cannellini beans, all the beans. They're great sources. And then you can also get protein from, I know this is still like a legume based product, but you can get the pulse pastas, like chickpea pasta and that.
I love those so much.
It's such an easy meal. And it's so high protein, so high fiber, like good iron, zinc, a lot of nutrients. So that's a great source of protein as well. And I mean, if you include a protein powder, obviously that's going to be, give you some protein. And you also get source protein from whole grains like your brown rice, brown bread, brown pasta, and quinoa, and nuts and seeds as well have small amounts of protein.
Right.
So I guess if you are a bit concerned that you're not getting enough protein, just kind of think at, every main meal, are you getting a decent source of protein?
Right.
And if so, you're probably fine, because we don't need as much protein as we think we do. Just in general, a lot of people have weight, like, not having too much protein is not the worst thing, but they have way more than their body actually needs.
Right.
Whereas it's quite easy to reach your protein requirements. So if you're just having a good source at every meal, you're likely fine.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, I guess I do see some people make like a salad or something and they might just sprinkle some chickpeas on top, but a good source is like a cup of chickpeas or a cup of black beans, or like a cup of tofu or something. That's kind of giving you a good source of protein.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're having a source at every meal and enough of that one ingredient.
I feel like it's so easy to add beans to things.
Yeah.
Like, I can add beans to breakfast, lunch and dinner so easily. Yeah. And I'm like, I feel like I go through like 5 cans of chickpeas a week.
I really want to actually try that. You've been making the like chickpea omelette or something?
Yes.
It looks so good.
I've recently discovered chickpea flour and it's like so good. I made this like breakfast bake the other day, and I made it on a base of chickpea flour, so it was kind of like an eggy breakfast bake. And I also made like a chickpea fried egg kind of thing. Cool. And it's just it's genius. I'm like, I don't know why I didn't start cooking with chickpea flour.
And I need to do it.
Okay, well, this ties in pretty perfectly, and it is, do you need to use a vegan protein powder?
Good question. I guess the short answer is no, you don't need to. Like, you can definitely get enough protein on a vegan diet, like I said before, making sure you include protein at every meal. You don't need to get a protein. You don't need to use a protein powder, but sometimes it can be just an easy, convenient option for people.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with using a protein powder if that's going to help you when it's more convenient for you. Like some people for breakfast, it can, commonly be a more low protein meal if you're just having a smoothie based on like fruit and almond milk or something. So adding a bit of protein powder can just help make sure that you are getting enough protein in that meal. And it also can be helpful, if you have...
He really does not want to stop.
Like if you have really, really high protein needs, like if you're a big bodybuilder who trains a lot, potentially, eating so many beans and tofu, you get sick of it, or it's just too much volume of food. So protein powder could be useful in that situation. But no, you don't need one, but it can be useful if it works for you.
And it's also really delicious a lot of the time. Like sometimes when I'm having protein powder in smoothies, I'm like, this is like for the flavor, but it's also good for me, which is great. Okay, so what are your thoughts on mock meats?
So mock meats, obviously, getting things like fake chicken or fake sausages or fake beef burgers and everything. And obviously they're a more processed food item compared to like tofu or tempeh or beans. But they can have a place in, a general healthy vegan diet. And they can also be really helpful for people that are transitioning. So it might be really hard if someone ate a lot of meat and they might not be able to go straight from, the like spaghetti bolognese or a chicken stir fry straight to lentils and tofu. So having that, the mock meat in the middle can really help you to transition over to more whole food based sources of protein.
Totally.
So that can be useful. And they're also like some of them are really delicious. And they're really easy to include in particular meals if you, or if you even like going to a barbecue with friends and you just want to bring some sausages so you're eating what everyone else is eating. And there's so many things now you can get. It's exciting. So it's kind of, if you want to try it, and they can have a place in moderation in a healthy vegan diet. So,
for sure. Okay, so this is a question that I feel a lot of people have, and it is, should I be worried about eating soy every day, especially with PCOS?
So there's obviously a lot of fear around soy in general, but if you look at I guess the fear from soy comes from people think that it can mess around with our hormones, like our female hormones and even male hormones as well. And that comes from, there's something in soy called phytoestrogens, which is like a plant version of our estrogen. And that particular compound that is a phytoestrogen are called isoflavones. That's the right word. And they have, really weak effects. They bind to the same receptors as our estrogen does, but they have a really, really weak effect. And some people think that this is, really negative, but the research actually shows that it can have a positive influence on our health.
Right.
So the studies that show that it has a negative effect, they're done in like test tubes or on animals. So that's, very different to humans.
Yeah.
And in those studies, the lab studies, they're using that isolated source of isoflavones, but when we eat it, we're having it in tofu, which is with fiber and protein and zinc and iron. Like, it's going to act very different in isolation compared to as a whole product.
So true.
So yeah, there's no reason to be afraid of soy, and it's a very healthy meat alternative to include in your diet. And I mean, the only people that need to be concerned about soy is if you're intolerant or you're allergic. Obviously, you're not going to be including soy.
Yeah.
And also, if you have been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which is a medical condition, and you're on medication for that, you can still eat soy, but the recommendations are just to have it away from your medication, because soy can reduce the effectiveness of that medication. But that's really the only scenarios that you would need to be afraid of soy. Even in PCOS, the research shows that it could be even beneficial for people with PCOS. So there's no need to be afraid of tofu or soy. It's fine.
That's such a common thing, hey. Like, I can even remember I got my dad to switch over to soy milk once.
Yeah.
And because he was just like consuming so much dairy, and I was like, oh my God, cut it out. Just try having soy in your coffee. And he started having soy in his coffee, and then his friend was like to him, oh, don't you know that men shouldn't eat that much soy?
Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, you can relax.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I think there was like one study that came out that showed potentially effects for males consuming soy, but the guy was having like liters and liters and liters of soy milk every day, and no one does that.
Yeah,
so anything, too much of anything is going to be negative for your health. So like soy, having a few servings a day is totally fine for everybody.
Yeah. So is it safe to be in a calorie deficit on a vegan diet?
That's a good question. I guess my answer is kind of relevant for both vegans and non-vegans, because obviously if you're in a calorie deficit, you're eating less than what your body needs. And if you're eating less, you're obviously eating less volume of food. So for anyone, including vegans and non-vegans, it's going to be potentially hard to meet particular nutrients if you're eating less food. Yeah. If you're restricting anything, you're restricting your nutrients that you're consuming. So it can be safely done if you, really plan out your diet. You potentially could see a health professional to help make sure your diet's really well planned to ensure you're getting your nutrients, or potentially in that scenario, you could benefit from extra supplementation, like a multivitamin or something like that, just to make sure you are meeting your needs while you are in that calorie deficit. So yeah, it can be done, but you might need extra planning or supplementation, vegans and non-vegans. Yeah,
everyone. Yeah. Okay, so our next question is, how do I feel full on a vegan diet?
That's a good question. I feel like there are a few sort of things that you could, think about and talk about here. But potentially when people, I guess if they first go vegan, they might more look to fill up on like fruits and veggies and those, less calorie dense foods. And that obviously won't fill you up for too long because it's not providing you with lots of energy. So if you're kind of thinking about eating enough foods from the food groups that I spoke about earlier, like your fruits and veggies obviously, but then your grain foods like bread, pasta, rice, and then your protein foods like tofu, tempeh, and beans, and calcium rich foods like your soy milks and calcium fortified tofu and whatnot, and then having nuts and seeds as well. So if you're eating like a wide variety of foods from all those food groups throughout the day and in all of your meals, you should be hopefully feeling satisfied if you're eating enough for you as an individual. So it could potentially just be not eating enough foods, or potentially at the meals you could be loading up on lots of like fruits and veggies in a salad or something, and not including other foods to kind of make it a balanced meal. So if you're having a balanced meal, that's going to keep you like satisfied and satiated for a longer time. And by balanced, I mean having like a protein source, a carbohydrate source and a fat source and plenty of vegetables. And that should, you know, fill you up and keep you satisfied for a longer time. So it could be looking at, you know, across the whole day you're eating enough in general.
Yeah.
And then at those individual meals, are you kind of having a balanced meal to help keep you full?
Yeah. I feel like the game totally changed for me when I went vegan, when I started including like protein and fat, because I was eating such like a high carb diet and then feeling like really full in the moment, but then like half an hour later being so hungry. And then when I started including like fats and proteins in every meal, I started feeling so much better and so full, and now it's like never an issue that I have. So, yeah, that's good. Love that. Do you have any advice for new vegans?
I think you could probably answer this as well. I think when people go vegan, they might be following a lot of people that make really complicated recipes and everything. So I feel like a big tip is just to go back to basics. And, you know, try simple recipes that don't include heaps and heaps of ingredients, and that, you know, are nutritious and everything. I do, shameless plug, I have a free ebook on my website that's like full of really simple, easy meals that are nutritious. So that could be a good place to start as well.
Definitely.
And then I guess also trying to make vegan versions of the meals that you used to like. Like if you really love spaghetti bolognese, then try to make a vegan version of that. And, you know, make vegan versions of things you used to enjoy. Even, you know, going out to vegan cafes and restaurants to give you inspiration and kind of, you know, open your eyes to a lot of the ingredients that you might not think that you might not think to use. So it kind of helps you, you know, you can take inspiration from cafes and restaurants to make that yourself.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like that's so true in regards to like making food that you had as a non-vegan, just veganizing it. I feel like that's like my biggest tip with going vegan is to really just look at what you're consuming now and what feels good for your body now, and go, okay, well, how can I make that vegan? And as well as that, just like don't be too hard on yourself. I think that there's like a lot of pressure to be the perfect vegan, and especially when people first go vegan, they tend to be really passionate and excited about it, and that's really, really awesome. But don't put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect that you like burn yourself out. I always love to say it's all about intention, not perfection. And living by that has like got me to a really good place where I'm at now with a vegan diet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think that's my advice as well.
And also I guess following people on social media or like YouTube, Instagram that are vegan, to learn from them and get inspiration from them to kind of help make it easier for you. Just like educating yourself as much as you can to make the transition easier, maintain it.
For sure. So next up we have a question that someone sent in saying that they were sent an article saying that vegans have frail bones, and can you talk about it?
Sure. I guess there has been research that has come out saying that, or showing that vegans have, you know, lower bone mineral density, which can lead to like fractures and frail bones. But this research is still very new, and it's also, a lot of them are quite flawed in the way that, you know, there are some studies that compare like meat eaters and vegetarians, pescatarians and vegans, and the vegans kind of have the lower bone mineral density, but they also have lower intakes of like calcium and protein and potentially vitamin D. And, you know, those nutrients are really important for bone health, as well as eating enough and eating a nutritious diet. So obviously, like anyone, vegan or not, if they're not getting those nutrients, they're going to have, you know, lower bone mineral density potentially, which can lead to that higher fracture risk. But if on a vegan diet, you know, you're meeting your calcium needs, getting enough vitamin D, getting enough nutrients in general, like protein and iron and everything, and also doing weight bearing exercise is really good for bone health as well. So if you're doing all that on a vegan diet, then you won't be at a greater risk of those fractures. But in those studies, you know, they have shown that that's potentially the reason that the vegans do come out on the bottom in terms of bone health. Well, it's like if you compare an unhealthy vegan to a healthy omnivore, then there's gonna be like a big difference. Like the healthy omnivore is probably gonna have less health issues than the unhealthy vegan, right? Whereas if you have like a healthy vegan and a healthy omnivore, like the difference would be very small, I'm sure. And also in research, it's so hard to, obviously it's all like try to do, obviously research is really important in health and everything, but it's also very hard when you're dealing with people and going off what they're reporting, what they're eating, and you know, there's so many factors that can influence the results. That's, you know, sometimes it's very hard to control for, and some studies are poorly, you know, run, or they might be really well run. It just depends. So obviously the research is there, but it's still limited and it can be flawed. So if you're eating, you know, enough nutritious foods and, you know, meeting your calcium and vitamin D needs and all those things are listed before, then you shouldn't be at any greater risk than a non-vegan.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are your tips for becoming a dietitian?
I guess the main one, and probably the most obvious one, is make sure you go to university to get your degree, to become a dietitian. And I guess also these are kind of tips for when you are studying to be a dietitian, and sort of will influence the outcomes as well. But I guess at uni, kind of be prepared to study a lot of science.
Right.
Like I went into uni, like I don't think I really understood how much science I'd be doing in those first couple years. Like you do so much anatomy and physiology, chemistry, biochemistry, like genes and disease and cells and tissues and all this stuff that you just don't think is relevant at the time.
Yeah.
But it really is relevant, you know, down the track. It will help you be a better dietitian if you understand all those foundation science subjects. So be prepared for that. And I guess during uni, a good tip is to like volunteer or do work experience with other dietitians, or kind of in, you know, nutrition related companies or things like that, to help get you experience, and can help you with jobs after you graduate as well, because you have more connections and you're networking with other people already in the industry. And it looks good on your resume as well if you've done volunteering and done extra work while you're studying. So I guess they're my tips. And then I guess once you graduate, if you know, to get a job easy, you kind of, it's beneficial if you're willing to move, because a lot of jobs maybe where you're living might be limited and it's very competitive, but if you're willing to kind of travel to go for work, like you'll get a job easy, because there is a lot of opportunity out there, but they might not be local to you.
Interesting.
I guess is that those tips?
Yeah, they're great tips. Is it important to get checked by a doctor if you get all your nutrients?
Yes. I think it's just, I mean, as we said before, we can get blood tests covered by Medicare in Australia, and how can you be like so sure that you are meeting all your nutrients every single day? And it's just for peace of mind as well, to make sure you're on the right track. You know, you might not be deficient in things, but if you look at the trends from your blood test, potentially you could be like dropping in certain things that you're not technically deficient, but it's good to catch that before you do become deficient. So you might think you're getting all your nutrient needs, but a lot of things can affect your nutrient needs on a day-to-day basis anyway. So I think it's just good to get, you know, it's recommended for everyone to get checked at least once a year, just for a general health check and get your bloods done. So I'd still recommend it, even if you think you are meeting all your nutrient needs.
For sure.
I think it's cool having all your data too, and like being like, I'm all good.
It's quite nice. It's like so satisfying when you get it, and they're like, oh yeah, like the doctor calls you, they're like, yeah, you're all good, you don't need to worry about anything. I'm like, it's like when you get like an A+ at school, it feels good.
For sure.
Is it possible to be vegan on a low FODMAP diet, or for someone with IBS? Which, I don't know if IBS is like an overdiagnosed thing, because I feel like every second person that I know these days has IBS and has gut issues, where maybe it's just that like certain foods don't agree with your body or whatever. But again, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I feel like it's quite common. Yeah,
for sure. And I think a lot of people, you know, they might get bloated or have like gas or something, and they think they have IBS, but bloating and gas is so normal for everyone. So I think it potentially, people just say they have it when they potentially don't, but I mean, they might. But it's kind of that diagnosis that you get once you've checked a lot of other things that could be wrong with your gut. And then if, you know, none of them are your diagnosis, then you just kind of have IBS. You get moved into that category. Being vegan on a low FODMAP diet or with IBS is definitely possible, but a lot of those FODMAP foods that cause symptoms with people with IBS are plants. Like they're all plants, so it's a lot of your fruits and veggies and like grains and like onion, garlic and all that sort of thing. So it could be a little bit harder to work out what foods you can and can't have on your diet that agree with you, but it can be done. But I guess everyone with IBS or that needs to follow a low FODMAP diet should definitely do it with the help of a dietitian, because that low FODMAP diet should only be followed for a very short amount of time.
Right.
And then you start introducing foods and in different amounts and different kinds of those FODMAP groups to then work out what works for you.
Right.
So it's very important to do that with the help of a dietitian. Otherwise, you run the risk of reducing so many foods and cutting out so many foods that you don't need to. So I guess, yeah, it can be done.
Yeah.
Potentially could be a bit harder than if you weren't vegan, but it definitely can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I have a friend who has IBS, and she eats like a predominantly vegan diet.
Yeah.
And she was having all these issues where like legumes were a no, soy was a no, dairy is a no, eggs are a no.
Yeah.
And there was just like, there wasn't a lot of options for her.
Yeah.
And so she just decided to continue eating a plant-based diet, but she would just eat fish as her protein source.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think again, it comes back to that like intention, not perfection mentality, where like, if you're having issues with your health, it is really important to like look after yourself.
Yeah.
And eating a predominantly plant-based diet is great.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Well, I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Is that eating more plants in general is a great place to start. Yeah.
And you really have to find what works for you and what's most beneficial for your health and your mental health. You know, like if you're really trying to restrict so many foods, but it's causing you a lot of anxiety and everything, then is it really worth it if you could do something else more beneficial?
Yeah.
And I guess with FODMAPs as well, you know, you might find certain foods don't agree with you, but that also can change over time. So potentially down the track, you could try reintroducing them, and potentially your body might say, yes, I can eat them now and you're fine. So I guess, yeah, there's a lot of people that say they have IBS or follow low FODMAPs, but there's a lot of people don't understand, I guess, the whole FODMAP diet. So yeah, as I said, it's important to work with a health professional just to make sure that you're getting what you need and making sure it works for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so can a vegan diet when you're a teenager affect development?
If you're having a well-planned vegan diet that's meeting your nutrient needs, then no, it won't affect your development. You know, vegan diets have been shown to be safe and healthy for everyone from, you know, pregnancy, for infancy and toddlers, children, teenagers, adults, older adults, everyone.
Yeah.
As long as it's a well-planned vegan diet that meets your nutrient needs. So as long as you're, eating a well-balanced vegan healthy diet, then no, it won't affect your growth and development.
Okay. Yeah, I assumed that.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's so interesting because like when I was a teenager, I ate like the worst diet ever.
Yeah.
Like I was so unhealthy, and I was eating like just like fried food and bread all the time.
Yeah.
And yet now, like if a teenager wants to go vegan, there's like concern about it, but like eating all the like processed stuff like, isn't concerning. It's so interesting. I mean, I guess everyone's different as well. But yeah. Okay, so our final question, I feel like, is a very, very popular and like common question that a lot of people would have, and it is, can you successfully recover from an eating disorder on a vegan diet?
Yeah, very important question.
Yeah.
I think I just want to also say, if you are suffering with an eating disorder, disordered eating, you really do need to be working with health professionals with your recovery, like seeing your doctor, a dietitian and a psychologist to help with your recovery, to say that straight up. Or if you think you might have an eating disorder, please go seek help. But I guess it might be a little bit controversial, but I guess it depends on the individual and the reason that they went vegan. I guess some people with, they go vegan, they have an eating disorder and they go vegan so that they can restrict a lot of food groups and a lot of foods, and they might not care about the ethical side of veganism or the environmental side. They're purely doing it so they can say, I'm vegan, and then they don't have to eat so many foods. And if that is true for somebody, then potentially part of their recovery could be including those foods back in, like animal products, and potentially in that time of their life being vegan is not not beneficial for their health. And if being vegan is stopping them from achieving recovery, then potentially it's not the best thing for them at the time. Down the track, potentially they could be vegan again, but for that particular person, maybe that at that time it's not beneficial for them.
Yeah.
However, if you were, you know, already vegan and then you developed an eating disorder, you potentially can still stay vegan in your recovery because you know, you still might be really ethically and environmentally driven to be vegan. It just really depends on the individual, why they're vegan, and so many other factors within their eating disorder.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
And I feel like I know that there are a lot of people in my online community who are struggling with restrictive eating or with eating disorders, and I think it's really important to remember, like, on a personal level, like, to be kind to yourself, and again, to remind yourself it's about intention, not perfection, because, you know, going vegan is really, really great, and like, I think it's amazing for people to want to be vegan and want to live a really healthy, full vegan life. But I think it's also important that to be able to live a healthy, full vegan life, you need to, like, work through what you're going through right now first, because sometimes going vegan at that stage in your life just isn't going to be beneficial for you or for veganism, I guess, is like something to remember. And like, having a goal of like being vegan in the future is also a really, really amazing thing to be doing. So yeah. Okay, I feel like that's a really, really nice place to end. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Courtney, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to leave everything linked below about Courtney, the free ebook, her Instagram, her website, everything, so that if you do want to go and see her, then you can if you're on the Gold Coast. And she's also posts really beautiful food photos on her Instagram and everything like that. So if you're looking for somewhere to get some really awesome info and just continue educating yourself, I think that's a really good space to visit as well. Yeah, and I'm always happy to answer questions in DMs or anything, or if you'd like me to explain something further from this video, feel free to just message me or anything. Super happy to talk to you. Awesome. Thank you so much.